Welcome back to Chat with Chet. I'm really excited today. Keith Townsend, we've been here in D.C., lots of speakers, lots of information. What stuck out the most to you?
You know what? What stuck out the most to me is what the number of users, and these are not like IT folks, these are end users, the number of users that downloaded RPA tools from the web and just started making stuff happen.
Right. We find that a lot. We find that a lot, and that's why a lot of the online community is so prevalent. You can download the community edition for free.
Right.
You can take the training online for free. You can play with this and start to see how you can apply it for free.
Yeah, this was my introduction to, I've heard the term RPA, I knew from a high level, I play a lot in the SAP world, so RPA and, automating finance was always there.
Right.
But from a government perspective, because most of the folks here was from government, it was completely shocking, like the number of use cases that people have come up to. I mean, the one VA use case for reducing paperwork, or not reducing paperwork, same amount of paperwork, but reducing the amount of human error and the ability to speed up care for vets. That was like, wow.
That's life-changing.
That was life-changing.
So we've heard mobile, we've heard cloud, we've heard digital transformation. RPA is poised to really make a difference in the way that people go about doing work. Do you agree or do you disagree, or where do you see this digital transformation?
So, the stigma around RPA, the reducing jobs. The great thing about the audience that you guys were talking to today were federal, and the drivers for federal is just so much different than it is for commercial. So they're kind of forced to find roles for we talked about the ethical part of RPA.
Sure.
And in the federal government, there's an incentive not necessarily to reduce headcount, but to become more efficient. And I think this is a great model for people next to robots. Like, how does this actually work? I think is where we're headed from a efficiency and what RPA can do.
Right. So we call it the automation first era. We want to look at any problem you have and say, if I automate this, does the problem go away? We want to couple with that, robot for every person. There's no reason that every person sitting at their desktop who has mundane tasks doesn't go online, learn how to code, or work with the internal groups to have that made an easy button on there. So one of the great things that I've heard about you, Keith, did a little homework before you got here. You work with the CTOs. You talk about the CTOs. Now, we hear a lot of CEO stuff. We hear a lot of that CFO stuff. We hear a little CIO stuff. Talk to me about the CTO and the role that the CTO plays in this overall digital transformation in the market at large.
So CIO is something that I aspired to early in my career. Like, oh man, the CIO is kind of the ultimate kind of the ultimate hilltop for technology.
King of the hill.
King of the hill.
Yeah.
And then as the industry matured, we realized that, one, I don't like management. So, CIOs, risk management, managing people, et cetera. CTO may do that. But more importantly, if you love technology and you love solving business challenges with technology at the highest level of an organization, that's where the CTO role comes in. So talking to folks that were at this show and looking at how technology is used and understanding from the macro level, how do you deploy technologies like RPA and integrate technologies like RPA into a organization, especially large organizations.
So I travel around a lot. I'm 2 to 4 cities a week evangelizing. The number one problem I hear from CEs, Is, Fs, T's is retaining good talent. Are you seeing that in the market at large?
You know what? A few years ago, I interviewed for a senior manager role at Comcast here, actually out here, to run their OpenStack group. A year later, that whole group is now at Walmart.
Wow.
So this is a real challenge. It's hard to motivate staff to begin with to learn new technologies. Then once you've motivated them to learn these new technologies, there's other companies looking to pick the fruits of your labor, like right off the top. This is a real challenge.
Yeah, so what you're going to find in RPA and to the public at large, as you engage in RPA and as you start to grow your environment, you need to get engaged with the communities. You need to get engaged with the other companies doing this around you. One, it's a place to find talent, but two, it may shield your talent from being poached if you're working in the community at large. But the education, the number of trained RPA developers we plan on putting out in the markets through the education programs that we're working through is huge. And I say all that to say this: I see careers in RPA popping up and growing faster than I see careers in other areas. Do you see that as well?
Yeah, so I'm super excited because my son does SAP Master Data.
Oh, fantastic.
And I looked at his job. We kind of talked through what he does. He's super efficient. He does, 50% of the work of a group of 7 people. But that raised a red flag to me. Like, well, if one person is doing that much work, then that job is probably ripe for automation. So I'm going to go home, download the community edition, bring him home, and say, hey, go at it. Because he has the domain expertise.
Well, and the mindset.
And the mindset. If you combine that with RPA, that's a career that's ready to take off.
If he gets stuck, have him call me. I'll help him too. So Keith, when we look at RPA and we look at the different companies that are starting to employ and deploy RPA, where do you see the maturity level? What's your feel on where we are today and where we're going?
So again, these are users who have problems. They just can't get their job done. And we've seen, we've been around, you can tell by the I've been around the industry long enough to know that when a user has a problem that IT can't solve, they will go out and find a solution. So this reminds me of cloud, that when AWS popped up and said, hey, you know what, you can come and solve these problems that your IT group isn't solving, RPA, same thing. And we're seeing some of the same stretch marks and growing pains that we saw in early cloud, which is around immaturity, around compliance, audit, governance, automation, self-service, all these things in cloud that we didn't do well at first. We're starting to see that start to come in, and people start to raise their hand to IT and say, you know what, you guys kind of figured this out with this DevOps, CI/CD, and all this stuff. With cloud, help us figure it out in the future. There's just a ripe field for maturing RPA right now. Easy to install it on your laptop, get it up and running, but scaling it and getting it to a mature level in the organization.
So some quick stats on that. We're about 10-11% penetrated in the overall market. RPA is not even going to be considered mainstream until we hit 15%. That's coming quickly. And understand, once you hit that 15%, it is an exponential growth across the markets. So wonderful to have you here today. Thanks for coming on and talking to us today. Any parting thoughts? Any one thing you want to leave them with?
So any one thing is, if you're not familiar with RPA, my audience is not as familiar with RPA as this channel may be, you know what, download it, test it out, read some of the use cases, and you'll walk away thinking, you know what, I know this, it feels familiar, I know what this does, let me engage the business community when they come to me with these challenges. All right.
Keith, one thing I was thinking about was, people talk about this is business-led, and some say that it's going to be IT-led. I view it as a marriage, that both sides really need to come together and go after this, because the business will be very strong in the ideas and where to apply, and IT has that ability to set up the infrastructure and come. Do you see one side over the other, or do you see them together to really
I see this as that's a great point. I see this as a marriage because a lot of the conversation was around scale. You're not getting big without IT on board. You're not getting big without IT on board. Even if you knew all of the technical parts of RPA, you just don't have the discipline and the capability to answer the audit questions, to answer compliance, security, reliability. Everything works on a laptop until you put it in production. And IT helps along with that. Same thing on the IT side. IT just simply doesn't have the domain expertise to implement this by themselves. It's like going out and implementing ERP by yourself without bringing the business along, or at least walking alongside the business.
I think this is a chance to bring them together.
Exactly.
And I'm excited to see that. Thank you for coming on. Thanks for watching. We're here with Chet, and we'll see you next time.